True Islam. Myths. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Most Merciful. In medieval times, the unwavering belief that the world was flat led to riots, isolation, and even death to those who dared contest this fallacy. Misconceptions and myths can be dangerous. Today, this same ignorance and intolerance has led to a backlash against Islam and Muslims.
Unfortunately, Muslims and Islam have been introduced to the Western civilizations and to the common people and the scholars through tragedies and wars. The Islamic religion has been hijacked by the terrorists. And we have to be very careful not to come to label the Muslims as terrorists, because that's not true. Not in the history, not today.
Contention and debate surround images of jihad and perceptions of the role and status of women in Islam. Since the tragic events of September the 11th, the most prevalent myth about Islam is that it encourages violence. Many scholars, politicians and media repeatedly associate Islam with terror. Islam is a peace-promoting religion and takes a strong and clear stand against the killing of non-combatants. According to the Quran, the holy book of Islam,
if anyone killed a person not in retaliation of murder or to spread mischief in the land, it would be as if he killed all mankind.
as with any society, not all citizens follow the codes and teachings of Islam. Fanatical interpretations of Islam are not representative of the religion and its teachings. The actions of a militant few can in no way represent the beliefs of over 1 billion people. As with the abuse of children by some Catholic priests, these actions should not implicate all Catholics. Those who claim to kill or harm innocent civilians in the name of Islam are not true Muslims. There is much misunderstanding of the term jihad, often misinterpreted as holy war.
The holy war is a Christian concept, not a Muslim concept, developed during the Crusades in the Middle Ages. Now jihad means literally to do your best, and therefore there is jihad in terms of thinking, there is jihad in terms of action. Now it has taken a particular view, meaning a military action against the other, but it doesn't have to be. And the highest form of jihad is jihad of the self, that is self-control.
لا يكون فقط الجهاد بالسيف أو في
Concerning jihad for the sake of Allah, jihad is not only practiced by the sword, or pistols, or cannons, or planes. Jihad is also practiced with the pen, with the tongue, through the advice one gives, or a lecture, and even through charity to other Muslims. There are many kinds of jihad.
As stated in the Holy Quran,
Permission is given to fight those who are fought against, because they have been wronged, and surely Allah is able to give them victory.
many more misconceptions about Islam relate to women. Wearing the veil is a requirement on all Muslim women, and the Quran commands it.
What you don't see is what you don't want. And the thing is that we have to understand that it's not oppression that we're making our women cover. Because when she's at home, she's not, it's not like she's all covered. It's only when she's out in the street. How many people actually really, although it's common in the West, for people to, shake other men's wives' hands and to dance with other men's wives and to hug other men's wives. But that's a step in the wrong direction, you know what I'm saying? Because if you let somebody hug your wife, then he's actually in a position that you belong to. It's your position that he's taking.
Following this requirement is, however, a woman's personal choice, not that of her husband or father as believed. Cassandra, who has converted to Islam, shares her thoughts.
Wearing the veil is also history, because I can see, looking back in time, that if somebody looks at me, they can have a why. Why would somebody do that? And it's understandable because the societies and cultures have gone so far the other way that the idea of morality and having manners or having being shy or being modest, these are like concepts that no longer exist, especially in the Western culture. So something that happened to me gradually. I mean, actually, when I first became Muslim, I told my husband one day, I said, I want to be Muslim, I want to pray, I want everything in Islam, but don't expect me to put anything on my head. That's like, my own conceptions at that time were so far as like of why it would be necessary. Because when somebody really believes, when they really say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah, that's the first step.
Veiling is a social aristocratic custom that was practiced during the life of the Prophet, and it started with the wives of the Prophet being veiled, and everyone in society wanted to imitate them and became a social religious practice.
Actually, what happened to me, that's why I covered my face totally, is I come to the point where, as myself personally, it's like I want to increase my faith, and I want to get as close to Allah as I can. I can't memorize Quran. I mean, as maybe a Westerner, and the language is so far from me. So memorizing Quran and feeling that feeling is kind of hard for me. And even the language in Arabic, I don't know, as foreigners, we have a hard time reading books. So to me, it's like I want to do the Sunnah, and that's how I saw it at first. It's like there's in Islam, the more we do Sunnah, the closer we get to Allah and His Prophet.
Another highly critical issue surrounds Islam's concession to marry more than one wife. Although polygamy is permitted, most Muslims practice this in cases of extreme necessity, and even then, the Quran demands we conform to very strict conditions set by God. As stated in the Holy Quran,
and if you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the orphan girls, then marry women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with them, then only one.
The option is still there, and this option has to be ordered in a very strict way, so men cannot misuse this option, because originally it was allowed for causes such as sickness, war, death, and other things.
today the practice is not so common. Yasmin explains.
I respect polygamy, of course, but I wouldn't choose it for myself. You know, when I got married, I asked my husband to write it in the contract because it's my right to do so. I asked him to say that if I get married, if he gets married to another woman, I get divorced automatically because I'm the jealous type. Simply. But I respect it because there are situations where it is very important, like at times of war, times of when there is an increase in women and a decrease in the number of men, etc. There are specific times when the woman is barren, but the men and women love each other, etc. So there are specific cases where it really works.
Although a woman has the right to marry only one man, when it comes to divorce, the Quran grants women the same rights as men. Although not encouraged, Islam does permit divorce on certain grounds. If the man is at fault and refuses to release his wife, she can demand a separation and bring an end to suffering a hostile relationship. While circumcision of men is mandatory, circumcision of women is not. Female genital mutilation is an unimaginable violation and is not an Islamic practice, as some may believe. It is based on social and cultural traditions rather than on religious teachings. Yana is a 25-year-old Christian woman from a village in North Africa.
I was circumcised as a very young girl. It was common practice in my village. My mother would have been ostracized if she had tried to interfere or stop it from happening. I have been out of my country for 7 years now, and I have a daughter too, back home. And no, I did not have her circumcised.
As with Yana, it is only through dialogue and education that misperceptions can be broken down and misunderstandings avoided. It is only then that differences between cultural, traditional and religious practice can be truly understood.
The tearing down of misconceptions is upon each and individual Muslim, each and every Muslim, because in our behavior and in our example in front of people, that's what tears these things down.
The 5 pillars of Islam.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
This is the testimony, or Shahada, which states that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. This is one of the first pillars of Islam. There are 5 pillars or principles that support Islam. Salah, or prayer, is one of these pillars. It is said that a person can never be a true Muslim unless he or she performs the 5 daily prayers that Allah has commanded. These prayers are performed at dawn, Fajr, noon, Zuhr, mid-afternoon, Asr, sunset, Maghrib, and nightfall, Isha. Before praying, we make Niyyah, which is the intention to pray to Allah. In accordance with the practices of the Prophet, peace be upon him, a strict cleansing ritual is performed before prayer, called wudu. We should not use more water than is necessary. First we wash our hands, face, arms, and finally the feet. All prayers are made facing the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca, no matter where we are in the world.
As a Muslim, practicing the 4 out of the 5 pillars of Islam, inshallah I'll do Hajj soon, I do the 4 pillars for now, is something very special to me. Doing the 5 pillars or the 4 pillars for me is something above the material world, is something in the metaphysical world. It's something that cannot be described unless you do it. You will not understand what I say unless you try it. It's another level of happiness.
Giving zakat to the poor or less fortunate is a very big part of Islam. The minimum amount is set at 2.5% of one's annual financial saving. Businesses are also required to pay 2.5% of their annual profits to the needy. The act of giving is to show solidarity with the poor in one's own community. Zakah should be given to nearest needy relatives, neighbors, or for eligible causes in the country where we reside. It is a religious duty to give, and the receiver's right to take. It is believed that the giver will receive ajr, or blessings. These blessings are multiplied during the holy month of Ramadan. Fasting during the month of Ramadan is compulsory for all able Muslims. When a Muslim fasts, he does not eat, drink, smoke, say or do anything wrong. According to the Gregorian calendar, the start of Ramadan is 10 days earlier every year, in line with the Islamic Hijri calendar. Fasting is not only a physical act, but also a purification of the soul. Whilst fasting, we are expected to abstain from all earthly pleasures, from food to water and sex. This is, however, only one component of the fast. The other is strengthening one's spiritual commitment to God.
Ramadan is such an important time for me, perhaps the most important time of the year for me, as it is for all Muslims. It's the time when we fast so we can feel a little bit with the poor and the hungry. It's the time when the Quran was revealed to our Prophet, so it's a very sacred and holy month. It's the time when all the family gathers on the ceremony of breaking the fast. So it's a very family-oriented time, and also it's the time when we go to the mosque and pray Taraweeh, which is a kind of prayer after we break our fast. So the whole society comes together at the mosque to pray. So it's a very nice time, socially, spiritually, ethically anything.
If you eat or drink anything whilst you're fasting, your fast is broken, but if you do so by mistake, then it is not. The pilgrimage, or Hajj, is the journey to Mecca for all Muslims who are physically and financially able to perform this voyage once in their lifetime. The pilgrimage itself is the final act of directing one's life to God. In Mecca, it is the one time where a Muslim stands with his brothers in Islam, with the same will to obey and worship God above everything else. It's a time when Muslims concede all worldly pleasures and refined luxuries, political and social status, and stand as equals before God.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm writing this letter to share some of my experiences of Hajj. Somehow I do feel like I have made a greater connection to Allah, Islam, and fellow Muslims. I tell you, it is the most humbling experience. The day I stepped back into the comfort of our home, my heart was filled in its entirety with gratitude for all the blessings that we have. There were days when we spent hours upon hours moving just a few kilometers amidst masses of people. It is so informative with practical lessons to support spiritual theory, and for me personally, it was a deeply moving experience that has helped me to answer so many questions within myself. I don't know how long the influence of the Hajj will last. Somehow worldly matters were so far removed from those 7 days in Mecca. However, I hope and pray that my experiences will remain embedded, at the very least, as my conscience, if not in my actions.
All 5 pillars are integral to supporting a Muslim's daily life. A true believer not only fasts and prays, but is someone who has totally surrendered himself or herself to God. Sharia. Every Muslim is under an obligation to fashion his entire life in accordance with the dictates of the Holy Quran and Sunnah, and is to observe at every step the distinction between what is right, halal, and what is wrong, haram. As man-made legal systems bind social codes of conduct in Western societies, so too Sharia law sets the guidelines in Islam. With high crime rates, broken homes, mental illness, chaos and confusion, so-called progressive, modern and enlightened man-made laws are questioned in Islam. The first primary source of Sharia is the Quran, the Muslim holy book, which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad by God in the year 622 AD. Muslims believe the Quran is the source of divine laws that govern their everyday lives. The Sunnah is the second primary source of Sharia. Sunnah is the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad and everything he did and said during his lifetime. The Sunnah is considered to be the second source of Sharia after the Quran, and by no means less important. Sharia governs all aspects of a Muslim's life, from marriage to death, to education, to social security, inheritance, property rights, and even economic systems.
إنما يطبق الحد إذا كان هناك خلافة إسلامية دولة إسلامية وهناك.
For had or punishment to be practiced, there must first be an Islamic nation, an emir responsible for this nation, and a committee of Islamic scholars and judges specialized in these matters. They alone can decide whether had should be practiced.
وجوبا للجرم الذي ارتكبه الإنسان.
In other situations, ta'zir is applied, which can include lashes, imprisonment, a fine, or simply a warning.
The word had, the translation of that in English would be capital punishment, right? Or corporal punishment. Now, what's interesting, we understand in the Bible, because we refer everything back to the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments is the foundation of the monotheic faith of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the final chapter, right? And we refer back to the Ten Commandments where it says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, thou shalt not commit adultery. These are all laws that are set down by God on us, right? And if people break these laws, then there's a punishment for it.
It is believed that if you are punished for a crime in this life, you will be absolved in the afterlife. According to Quranic guidance, drinking liquor does more harm than benefit to an individual and society as a whole. Many cases of horrible crimes, accidents and domestic violence occur under the influence of alcohol and other intoxicating substances. Human life is sacred in Islam. In the case of intentional murder, the accused is executed. If, however, the murder was accidental, diya or blood money is paid to the family of the deceased. As Islam focuses on the well-being of the family and extended family, inheritance laws are based upon the premise that men are the main providers for a family and would therefore receive the greater part of the inheritance. The right to own property was given to both men and women 1400 years ago. At the same time, women gained the right to vote and participate in political life.
Women have been able to vote on everything for 1400 years, and only just in the beginning of the 20th century did women be able to vote in the Western countries. Women had the right to run businesses and own property and inherit, whereas women did not until the 20th century.
In Switzerland, it was just not too long ago, I'm talking about within about 50 years ago, that women were just allowed to vote. Well, over 1400 years ago, women were allowed to vote in Islam, right? Women were allowed to hold positions of authority, right? They were allowed to study. They were allowed to work. And you heard that saying, what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine? Islamically, that's correct for the Muslim woman, because what she earns is hers.
This is the one that I like the best, is women back then as well as today, whatever monies they keep, and whatever the monies that they make, they get to keep. They don't have to pool their income resources with the household.
The Islamic economic system is different from conventional commercial transactions. Today there are many investment opportunities in compliance with Islamic Sharia, introducing the investor to socially responsible funds listed on the Dow Jones Islamic Market Index, among other indices. Some restrictions include companies producing, distributing or selling alcohol, pork or pornography, operators of gambling casinos and producers of gambling equipment, as well as financial investment institutions that invest in restricted companies. The principles of Islamic banking are grounded in Sharia law, whereby banks enter into a partnership arrangement with the investor, sharing both profits and losses. Muslims are discouraged from living on credit. Sharia encourages cash transactions in order to limit debt and allow us to live free from financial worry and anxiety. If crimes are allowed to go unchecked, it will most certainly disrupt the social fabric of the whole ummah or state. Sharia law merely provides the guidelines to protect Islamic societies. The family in Islam. The family is at the core of Islam, and religious laws are aimed at maintaining and strengthening family relations. Founded more than 1400 years ago, Islam brought a message of peace and goodwill to all mankind, based upon human rights and civil liberties, as it is understood across all religions today. The Quran is Islam's equivalent of the Bible or Torah. The Quran, as well as the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, calls for mutual respect and love between parents and their children. Muslim parents are held accountable before Allah or God for the way they raise their children. In return, Muslim children are expected to respect their parents, listen to their opinions, never raise their voices in front of them, and take great care of them as they grow older. Homes for the elderly are very rare in Muslim societies. The responsibility of aging parents and grandparents is shared by the children. Rana Atani is the oldest of 4 and lives at home with her parents. She is not restricted to the house and has many friends she socializes with.
Well, the only time that I may think of leaving the house is when I get married, so I just move to my husband's home. Islam stresses the strong relation between the family, between the parents and the children. Moreover, it obliges us to treat our parents in a very nice way, in a very respectful way. We should respect them all over the road. We should be able to give them whatever they want. and as in return they should also treat us in a very good way and give us all what we need. So Islam puts the rules on how we should treat our parents and how they should treat us.
The Yatanis are a typical Muslim family, living as much as possible in accordance with the teachings of Islam. Their lifestyle as a family is focused on helping one another and accordingly pleasing Allah. Mona is the mother, and besides her tasks at home, she works at the university. Islam does not oblige her to contribute any of her earnings to the household. That is her choice.
Concerning women, Islam does not forbid women from working.
I think a Muslim woman should have many characteristics that reflect the principles of Islam. A Muslim woman should be veiled in the first place. She should be educated, she should be active, having from the inside that she wants to help the society, she wants to help anyone, no harm, no insult, nothing bad should be done for others. She should also be pious, modest, caring, loving for his children, loving for her family, energetic. She can be educated, of course, as I said before, because this reflects her education, and her personality is reflected to her children, which are the future generation. So Islam doesn't prevent me or any Muslim woman from doing anything she wants, but of course within ethical boundaries and within the principles that Islam wants. For example, I was educated in an American university and I've got an engineering degree. I also work in an engineering company.
Despite her full schedule, Rana also finds time for her friends and religious commitments. Every Wednesday evening, Rana, her sisters and their friends meet for a halakah at a private center in Beirut. A halakah is a religious gathering. The sheikh leading the gathering this evening is a graduate in religious studies from the famous Azhar University in Cairo. Marwan, the father, is responsible for supporting the family financially. He owns a small textile shop downtown, which, he says, serves the needs of his family. Every Friday, he attends prayers at his local mosque. Both Mona and Marwan have taught their children the ways and teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The family prays together as often as they can. Education is compulsory for both men and women, in religious as well as scientific and social studies, not only to advance a personal professional career, but also to know and understand one's religious rights and duties, which helps in making everyday decisions.
Of course, if we go to the literature of the Prophet, peace be upon him, we could find it in one phrase that says, knowledge is a duty upon every Muslim. Of course, when we say every Muslim, mean male and female. And that's amazing in that time, at the very beginning of the 7th century. That was something amazing. It was like a revolution to ask people to seek knowledge wherever they are.
As stated in the Holy Quran,
O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes that you may know one another.
Yet the images we see in the media, in films and on the news create quite a different impression. Images of helpless veiled women forced to stay at home and bearded men trailed by strings of wives. Like any society, those images are not always wrong. But what is wrong is to only portray Muslims behaving in un-Islamic ways. Following a simple day in the life of the Yatani family represents just another day in the lives of many Muslim families, not only in the Arab world, but all over the planet. Jihad. A young man approached the Prophet Muhammad, the messenger of God, and said he knew that the struggle they were fighting needed men. The young man offered to fight as a form of jihad, saying he believed this is what Allah had commanded him to do, even though his mother was weeping at home. The Prophet Muhammad gently advised the young man to go home and allow his mother to laugh in the same way he had made her cry. Jihad, according to the Holy Quran, is a form of self-sacrifice. It's a struggle within oneself. There are many forms of jihad and many ways to give of oneself. With 1.2 billion followers around the world, Islam is the fastest growing religion and often the most misunderstood.
The majority of Muslim jurists view jihad as a defensive act. That is, when Muslims are attacked, then they can launch jihad. A minority of jurists view jihad as an offensive, global fight against the infidels, and therefore you have to. But the most outstanding historical practice is jihad as defensive war and not as offensive war.
Even before evidence was revealed in the 1993 World Trade Center attack and the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, allegations pointed to Muslims. The September the 11th attack on the World Trade Center was, in Quranic terms, not jihad, but a terrorist attack.
Jihad. It's interesting. Especially these days, you know, we're hearing this word in the news quite a bit. Now the interesting thing about Arabic, you can always break the word down to its root, and it usually goes back to 3 sounds. And what you have in jihad is jahada, which means to struggle. Now, a jihad is not only a struggle with a gun or a sword or M16 or a Kalashnikov, you know, it's also with the word, you know, because in Islam we believe that the pen is mightier than the sword, and the pen is also a way of peace, which brings us back to the foundation of Islam, which means peace.
Jihad refers to an Islamic concept that includes the effort to improve the quality of life in society and one's own personal life. Dawah is the cornerstone of jihad. It is the call or invitation to Islam. It introduces the religion's principles and clarifies any uncertainties surrounding the faith. This is the cornerstone of jihad. With 21st century technology, Dawah has become globally accessible on the information highway. Nowhere in the Quran is the term holy war used. In fact, the concept of holy war first emerged in 1095 when Pope Urban II called on Christians to take up arms to liberate Jerusalem from Muslims and other heretics. In history, this marked the beginning of the Crusades. Teachings of the Prophet Muhammad recount that after a battle, the Prophet told his followers they had returned from Jihad al-Asghar, a lesser jihad. When asked what the greater jihad is, the Prophet replied, "It is the struggle against oneself." Defensive jihad can only be carried out under strict consideration of the following rules, according to the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Those are to go in the name of Allah, not to kill old men, children or women, and never to mutilate the bodies of the enemy.
Be merciful to women, kids or children, and also what life is about, including trees. Now, it happened in the history that when there is a complaint to the commanders about any of the soldier torturing or killing innocent people, that's a crime. Therefore, to us as a Muslim, it's clear that killing any, terrorizing any, Muslims or non-Muslims, sin. It has been forbidden and it has to be implemented.
These rules, introduced by the Prophet and his companions more than 1400 years ago, still apply today and comply to the codes of war stipulated in the 1949 Geneva Convention. Only a recognized religious Muslim leader is entitled to proclaim jihad. As there is no one recognized Muslim leader, scholars say that no person today has the religious legitimacy to declare jihad in the name of Islam. The first Muslim state was established in 622 AD in what today is the Saudi Arabian city of Medina. At the time of the Prophet, the inhabitants were vulnerable to attack and had to defend themselves. Only then did God allow the Prophet Muhammad to fight back. There are many forms of jihad, and it is up to each individual to take responsibility for his or her own actions. Some may be honored as martyrs, others for keeping the peace or staying at home to support families and communities.
The face of terror is not the true faith of Islam. That's not what Islam is all about. Islam is peace.